My channel grader beat thinking, and one day I will die. Heck, one day all of us will likely die. But the good news is that right now we're all alive, so congratulations to all of us for that. That said, if you're watching this right now and you're dead, comment below. You're not dead to me anyway. I'm YouTube's American Presidents guy now, apparently, and breaking news, 39 American presidents have died. Now, some of them have been dead for a while. In this video, we're going to look at how every president in American history died. I would argue that being president is the most dangerous job in the world. 18% of them have died while on the job. 9% of them were assassinated. In fact, there was a period of about 122 years in which EIG presidents died while on an OFICE. Now, you could say that presidents tend to be older when they take office, and that is a fair point. Still, it's no wonder the president now has an entire Secret Service team of thousands to protect them. Oh, and an entire White House medical unit to take care of all their medical needs. It's a dangerous and stressful job. I mean, just look at these before and after photos. While most of us hope for painless deaths, like dying in our sleep, tragically many American presidents died horrible, extremely painful deaths. Oh, and while we're at it, we might as well look at the supposed last words of every president, even if sometimes those last words are, totally not profound at all. And let's go in chronological order at time of death, instead of when they held office to mix it up a bit. But, George Washington, our first president, was indeed our first president to die. He likely died of epiglottitis, which is the inflammation of the epiglottis, or that little flap thingy at the base of the tongue that prevents food from getting into your windpipe. The doctors who treated him didn't quite know what it was, though, and just tried bloodletting. He ended up losing around 40% of his blood before he died. He was 67, and his last words were, "T's well." The second president to die was Thomas Jefferson, the third president. The third president to die was John Adams, the second president. And crazy thing, they both died on the exact same day, which was July 4th, 1826, which was the 50th anniversary of the country. The two had a close friendship that went back to when they both led in the Continental Congress during the American Revolution. That said, later on, they were bitter political rivals for a while. In their later years, they once again became besties and wrote to each other regularly. Jefferson apparently had a slow, painful death and was bedridden for his final months. What officially caused his death were really bad infections in his bloodstream. I mean, apparently he had urine in his blood related to having severe kidney damage. On top of that, he had pneumonia. His last words were, "No, doctor, nothing more," although before that he had supposedly said, "This is the fourth." John Adams apparently died of heart failure, and his death was more sudden than Jefferson's. Unaware that Jefferson had died just hours before him, his last words included, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Jefferson was 83 and Adams was 90. The fourth president to die also died on July 4th. No joke, princess. James Monroe, the fifth president, died from tuberculosis and heart failure exactly 5 years after Jefferson and Adams. He was 73. His last words referred to Ace, good friend James Madison, the fourth president. They supposedly were, "I regret that I should leave this world without again beholding him." There's no solid evidence he ever said that, though. Madison was the next president to die, dying almost 5 years after Monroe on June 28, 1836. He almost died on July 4th, too, and his doctors actually tried to get him to take stimulants to prolong his life until then. Anyway, he also died of heart failure. He was 85. Before he died, one of his nieces asked him what was wrong. He supposedly replied, "Nothing more than a change of mind. My dear, I always talk better lying down." So yeah, those were his last words. William Henry Harrison, the sixth president to die, was the first to die in office just a month into his presidency. He was 68. It's a common misconception that he caught a cold that turned into pneumonia after giving a really long speech at his inauguration and refusing to wear a jacket in chilly weather. Well, he did give a 2-hour speech at his inauguration, and he did not wear a jacket on a chilly day. However, he didn't get sick until more than 3 weeks later. And yes, the official cause of his death was pneumonia. However, 173 years later, experts argued that he actually caught typhoid from bacteria in the water supply. His last words were, "Sir, I wish you to understand the true principles of the government. I wish them carried out. I ask nothing more." Andrew Jackson was the next president to die. He had survived so much crazy stuff his entire life, but ultimately his heart failed him on June 8, 1845. He was 78. At the time of his death, he also suffered from edema, which is the buildup of fluid in the body's tissue. On his deathbed, after reacting to his family crying around him, his last words were, "What is the matter with my dear children? Have I alarmed you? Oh, do not cry. Be good children, and we will all meet in heaven." 3 years later, the sixth president, John Quincy Adams, died from a stroke at the age of 80. He had worked in Congress up until his death, and his last words were, "This is the last of earth. I am content." Future President Abraham Lincoln was there when he died. James Polk died far too young. He was only 53 when he died from cholera, likely from drinking contaminated water. He died just over 3 months after he left office. It was crazy to see how quickly his health deteriorated because as president, he was energetic and passionate. He died with his wife, Sarah, at his side, and his last words were, "I love you, Sarah, for all eternity, I love you." Next was Zachary Taylor, who was the second president to die while in office. Less than a year and a half after swearing in, he died from gastroenteritis or inflammation of the gastrointestinal tract. Us Americans call it the stomach flu for some reason. It must have been painful for him. It's worth noting that there were theories that he may have been poisoned, but analysis of his remains in 1991 could find no proof of that. Still, some historians think it's a possibility. Taylor's last words were, "I am about to die. I expect the summons very soon. I have tried to discharge all my duties faithfully. I regret nothing, but I am sorry that I am about to leave my friends." 2 former presidents died in 1862 at the height of the American Civil War, a Yankee and a rebel. First, the 10th president, John Tyler, in January, and later the 8th president, Martin Van Buren, in July. No, not July 4th. Tyler died from a stroke. He was 71. Shortly before he died, he took a sip of brandy and told his doctor, "I am going." The doctor replied, "I hope not, sir." Tyler then responded, "Perhaps it is best." Those were his last words. He's the only president to be buried with a Confederate flag instead of an American flag. By the way, Van Buren died from heart failure brought on by bronchial asthma. He was 79 and had lived to see 8 more presidents succeed him in the office after he left it. That's still the record. Although, if Jimmy Carter sticks around a few more years. Supposedly his last words were, "There is but one reliance." The next president to die was the first assassinated in office. When Abraham Lincoln and his wife and friends were watching a show at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., John Wilkes Booth came up behind Lincoln, who was laughing hysterically in reaction to the show, and shot him in the head at point-blank range. After going into a coma for 8 hours, Lincoln died the next morning. He was 56. I have an entire video about the assassination if you've got some extra time to watch. We don't know his last words for sure, but one account says they were, "She won't think anything about it." That was a response to Mary, Lincoln's wife, after she asked him what Miss Harris, one of their friends sitting next to them, would think of her hanging on to him so much. 3 years later, James Buchanan died from both respiratory failure and rheumatic gout. He was 77. Some say his last words were, "Oh, Lord God Almighty, as thou wilt." But honestly, I'm not that convinced they were. Seems a little too dramatic for me, just saying. Franklin Pierce died the next year from inflammation of the stomach. He had been suffering from liver cirrhosis for several years, yet had drunk alcohol heavily. Anyway, so yeah, basically, alcohol killed him. I've covered on this channel before how tragic his life was. And it's even the chorus of the song I made about him. But let's add to the tragedy, shall we? He died alone, with no family members present. And that's why we don't know his last words. We do know he was 64 when he died. Millard Fillmore was next. He died from a stroke at the age of 74. His last words supposedly were, "The nourishment is palatable," referring to a bowl of soup he had just finished. Even though I doubt these were his last words, it's fun to pretend they were. The next year, Andrew Johnson also died from a stroke. He was 66 and was still an active U.S. Senator representing Tennessee at the time. Also at the time, he was the only surviving past president. Yeah. Few can agree about what his last words were, so I'm not going to speculate on this one. James Garfield was the second president to be assassinated while in office. However, if he had competent doctors, perhaps he would have survived. Just 4 months into his presidency, a mentally ill fellow named Charles Gateau came up to Garfield and shot him twice, once in the back and once in the arm. "My God, what is this?" Garfield shouted afterward, but those would not be his last words. Most people don't know that after he was shot, Garfield was slowly starting to recover before his doctors screwed things up. While trying to get his bullet out with unsterilized fingers and tools, they caused a severe infection. 2 months after getting shot, Garfield died from septic shock. His last words were to his friend, General David Swaim, clutching the tremendous pain in his chest. He said, "Oh, Swaim, can't you stop this?" Oh, Swaim! It must have been a painful death indeed. He was just 49. Ulysses Grant also had a slow, painful death. At 63, he died from throat cancer after suffering from it for at least a year. His last words, "Wooard was water." The next year, Chester Arthur died from a stroke at the age of 57. We don't know his last words. The next president to die was Rutherford Hayes. After suffering from a heart attack, he died from heart disease at the age of 70. His last words were, "I know that I'm going where Lucy is." By the way, Lucy was his beloved wife. Now, where was she? Well, frankly, I think she was in the bathroom. Wait, what's that? Oh, heaven. Hayes thought she went to heaven, so he was going there too. Benjamin Harrison was next. He got influenza, which then turned into pneumonia. He died from it at the age of 67. Now, his last words make sense to me. Are the doctors here? "Doctor, my lungs." Yep, pneumonia sucks. The next president to die was the third one to be assassinated while in office. That'd be William McKinley. After serving as president for 4.5 years, a zealot named Leon Czolgosz shot him twice in the stomach. Czolgosz thought McKinley was a symbol of oppression and government bad and stuff. McKinley appeared to be recovering in the days following the shooting, but then took a turn for the worse. He ended up dying from gangrene, a severe type of tissue death caused by a lack of blood supply. Do me a favor and don't Google pictures of it. You just did, didn't you? Anyway, his last words were, we are all going. God's will be done, not ours." He was responding to his wife, Ida, who had said, "I want to go too." 7 years later, Grover Cleveland, the 22nd and 24th president, was the 24th president to pass away. He suffered from a heart attack and died at the age of 71. He had had ongoing health problems, suffering from coronary sclerosis and intestinal obstruction. His last words were, "I have tried so hard to do right." Me too, Grover. Me too. Teddy Roosevelt was next. His death was a bit of a shocker, to be honest. On the night of January 5th, 1919, he had been struggling to breathe. He saw his doctor, who gave him some kind of treatment, and after that Roosevelt felt better and then went to bed. However, he never woke up. He died in his sleep, which is why his last words were, "Please put out that light." James, which he had spoken to his family servant, James Amos, before he drifted off. The vice president at the time, Thomas Marshall, famously said death had to take Roosevelt sleeping, for if he had been awake, there would have been a fight. It's assumed he died from a coronary occlusion caused by a blood clot. He was just 60. Warren Harding was the 6th president to die in office, but 3rd to die in office of natural causes. When he was traveling along the West Coast, he suddenly experienced severe stomach and chest pains. After some rest, he began to recover and traveled down to San Francisco, but down there he began to feel like crap again and became bedridden at the Palace Hotel. On August 2, 1923, his wife Florence was reading a flattering article about him from the Saturday Evening Post. After she paused, he told her, "That's good. Go on, read some more." Those were his last words, as he had a dramatic heart attack right afterward. He died at the age of 57, just less than 2.5 years into his presidency. Woodrow Wilson died just a few months after Harding of a stroke, although he had already suffered from a severe stroke a few years before when he was president that nearly killed him then. In fact, afterward he was partially paralyzed and nearly blind because of it. Supposedly, his last words were, "When the machinery is broken, I am ready." He was 67. Today, he's the only president buried within Washington, D.C. Next to die was William Taft. Taft is known as the heaviest president in American history, but in his final years, he made a significant effort to get in shape, exercising regularly and eating healthier foods to lose around 100 pounds. He also worked right up until right before he died as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. However, his health had declined beginning in the late 1920s. He died of inflammation of the liver and heart disease when he was 72. We don't know his last words. Calvin Coolidge died of a heart attack at the age of 60. His death was sudden and unexpected. Apparently his last words were, "Good morning, Robert." Robert was a carpenter who had been working on his house. Franklin Roosevelt was the 7th president to die in office, but that was after he had been re-elected a fourth time. When he died at the age of 63, supposedly from a stroke, he had been in office for more than 12 years. Now, I say supposedly, since some historians argue the real cause was melanoma, a type of skin cancer. His last words apparently were, "I have a terrific headache." Next to die was John F. Kennedy, the most recent president to die in office and 4th assassinated. His death is arguably the most famous death of all the presidents, and right now you can search online and see footage of it. He died from gunshot wounds, and it was dramatic in front of what seemed like the entire world as he paraded through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas on November 22, 1963. Now, we're not going to get into all the theories about who RLY killed JFK, but according to the Warren Commission and most historians, undoubtedly the main dude responsible was Lee Harvey Oswald, who was murdered himself just 3 days later. Public opinion polls have demonstrated that most Americans still don't believe the official version tells the whole truth about what really went down with JFK's death. His last words were, "No." You certainly can't. He was responding to Nellie Connolly, the wife of then Texas Governor John Connolly. She had said before that, "You certainly can't say that the people of Dallas haven't given you a nice welcome, Mr. President." At just 46, John F. Kennedy was the youngest president to die in American history. Herbert Hoover died the next year. He had gone through several health problems the last couple of years of his life, but the official cause of his death was massive internal bleeding. We don't know his last words, but he did live to the old age of 90. A pretty good run there, Hoover. The Grim Reaper's next visit was to Dwight D. Eisenhower's house. He died from heart failure at the age of 78. He had heart problems for a while and famously suffered from a heart attack while he was president. His last words were supposedly, "I want to go. God take me." Harry Truman was the next to die. His organs had failed and his blood pressure went extremely low after suffering from severe pneumonia. He was 88. We don't know his last words. Lyndon Johnson died less than a month after Truman, despite not first serving as president until 10 years after Truman left office. LBJ, who smoked heavily for much of his adult life, died from a heart attack at the age of 64. His last words were, "Send Mike immediately." Mike was his Secret Service agent who was assigned to his Texas ranch. By the time Mike arrived, Johnson was already dead. The next president wouldn't die until more than 21 years later. That would be Richard Nixon, who died from a stroke at the age of 81. His last word makes a loti of sense. It was, "Help." Ronald Reagan was the next president to die, dying from pneumonia after long struggling with Alzheimer's disease, which he was first diagnosed with in 1994. As horrible as Alzheimer's disease is, remember Reagan nearly became the 5th president assassinated while in office, but survived a gunshot wound back in 1981. We don't know Reagan's last words, but he was 93. 2 years later, Gerald Ford died officially of arteriosclerotic cerebrovascular disease and diffuse arteriosclerosis. Okay, look, he had heart issues. He was also 93, and we also don't know his last words. And finally, the most recent president to die was George H.W. Bush, who died of Parkinson's disease on November 30, 2018. He was 94 at the time, the longest lived American president. But that distinction is now held by Jimmy Carter. Bush's son, George W. Bush, who himself was president, reported that his dad's last words were, "I love you too." In conclusion, you may have noticed that most American presidents have lived rather long lives, even though it's supposedly the most dangerous job in the United States. Presidents have historically lived longer than the average American. The average lifespan for Americans is currently 78.9, but in 1860 it was just 39.4, due to so many children dying back then. The average lifespan for all 39 American presidents who have died is 71.1, but remember that goes back to 1797. 24 of the 35 presidents who died of natural causes lived longer than the average life expectancy of their time. If you just look at presidents who have died over the past 50 years, the average lifespan number for presidents goes up to 85.5. Plus, look at the 6 presidents who are still alive. They're old, man! Especially the aforementioned Jimmy Carter, who is currently 97 years young. And then there's the current president, Joe Biden. The moment he was sworn into office, he was already the oldest president in American history. He recently turned 79, and yep, he's already expressed interest in running for re-election, even though he'll be 82 when that happens. Anyway, that's how every president died. Congratulations for staying alive through this whole video. Remember, most of the presidents died from strokes, so watch that blood pressure! Oh, and don't forget to buckle your safety harnesses. As you can tell by which glasses I have been wearing for this video, these are the ones I chose. What kind of president's video should I make next? Let me know down below. It's time to recognize my Patreon supporters for their support. Here's my monthly shout out to every Patreon supporter who donates at least 15 or more each month to my channel, alphabetically, starting with my biggest donors at the George Washington level: Alexander, Major Alicia, Solberg, Andrew B., Anthony Beckett, Austin Cyros, Brady Bardwell, Corey Remen, Dratar Paul, J. Lilly, Elijah Ellis, Josie Ramsey, Kyle Fassbender, Matt Standish, Neo, R14 Nick, Everett Osborne's Gaming Pat, A. Picassine, Kenneth Thomas, and William Rosh. At the Dwight Eisenhower level: Adam Christians, Aesthetic, Deegan, Andrew Snyder, Brian Layton, Christian Ojeda, Empty Machine, Gail Jerd, Grant Huzine, Driscoll, Alon Capone, Jack L. Jacob, Birnbaum, Joel, Serrano Lozada, John Johnson, Kit Walker Lee, 48, Naderade, Nelson, Guzman, Robert, Rachel Samuel, Striz, Thomas, Oppenheim, Victor, Martinez, Waterford, and Zachary F. Parker. Thank you all, and thank you for watching. You're still watching. Whoa.